reading in, out of the Japanese school? Was that like practitioners like Richard Koo, for example?
Yeah, Richard Koo was a
say.
big one. I talked to Koo a lot back in 08, 09 about a lot of that stuff.
Did you get into Richard Werner a lot or at all?
Yeah, talked to Werner a lot. He's really great on all of this stuff. Steve Keen's really great on all of this stuff. And that weirdly, learning that stuff, learning the banking stuff, because the banking was what really interested me, because it is directly correlated to the financial market. So, I don't really give a shit that much about like high theory, and like honestly don't care that much about public policy, because it's not really, it's not really my business. I mean, it's theoretically interesting, but it wasn't like directly interrelated with like my job for the most part. So, but the banking stuff was like really, really, directly aligned with not just like my accounting background and my finance background, but it seemed really essential to understanding the way that QE worked. And so, learning stuff like that was just super interesting, because, it completely transformed my understanding, but it took me down this path of sort of learning what's essentially called post-Keynesian economics, which is basically like the post-Keynesians are the people in econ they're kind of outcasts, to be honest. They're kind of like the heterodox school that a lot of the mainstream just shuns off as like, spouting nonsense to some degree. And they're the economists who they adhere really to like what they would say John Maynard Keynes really believed in. So a lot of the current mainstream economists, what a post-Keynesian would say about them, or even someone like would say about like a Larry Summers, or even like a Paul Krugman, who's commonly called a Keynesian, they'd say, no. He's like those are bastard Keynesians, basically, that like they're people that they took bits and pieces of like the general theory and Keynesian economics, and they intermingled it with a lot of like American economics and like Milton Friedman type understandings. And they created their own sort of like hyper free market type of economics that isn't really the true Keynesian lineage. So, but I started learning about all these post-Keynesian schools, and, Steve Keen's like a big post-Keynesian. I met actually a fellow Canadian, Mark Lavoie, who is in one of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet, and started learning all of these sort of post-Keynesian ideas and these very heterodox ideas, like the idea that banks don't lend their reserves to non-banks. And that kind of took me down the path of learning about MMT. And then I met all the MMT people, and what all the MMT people say, it turns everything on its head. And that really is like, you go through the whole learning process of MMT and you're like, wait a minute, bonds don't finance government spending, taxes don't finance government spending. And you're like, holy shit, is everything that I learned about money and finance like completely wrong? And so that's kind of like the path I've been on for the last, 10 years of kind of, traversing all this stuff. And I got to a point in like 2011 where I was like, holy cow, MMT seems like it's very, very accurate. And then started talking to Lavoie and a couple of other people that are Tom Pally and some people who are kind of critical of MMT and who have interacted with the MMT people for a long, long time. And they were like, yeah, a lot of it's right, but there's some really, really highly theoretical stuff here that you cannot say is factual in any way. So that's kind of where I'm at now on all this stuff. Basically, I think everybody's full of shit.
Well, yes, exactly, right? It's all a bunch of stories.